lot of questions about which foundation should I use, which foundation works with what frame. And so what I'd like to do right now is take you through some of the various types of foundation and which frames would be most appropriate for that particular foundation. And the order in which I go through these foundations is roughly the order of popularity amongst the beekeepers based on the amount that we sell. So first let's start with a wax foundation that, as you can see, have these lines in them. These lines are actually thin wires. It's called crimp wire foundation because these wires are embedded in that plastic. And in this particular case, you may notice that the wire runs through the foundation and then has a 90-degree angle bend at the top. This is called crimp wire foundation with a hook because that wire hooks at a 90-degree angle. This hook actually gets wedged with the wedge from the wedge top bar into that top bar. So it pins it into the frame and allows it to hang down. This particular type of foundation is best used in a wedge top bar with a divided bottom bar. We do not recommend using a grooved bottom bar, as sometimes these sheets are just a little bit longer and they bottom out in the groove and therefore create a little buckle. With the divided bottom bar, it's able to hang down freely and you get a nice straight foundation and therefore a nice straight comb. So this is crimp wire with a hook. Another sheet of foundation that's very popular that we carry in medium size only is crimp wire, but it does not have a hook. And the advantage of this is that you can use a groove frame. You can build that frame and then very simply pop this foundation into that assembled frame once it's completely assembled. And you don't have the added step of nailing the wedge in place to support the foundation. And we only offer it in medium because the longer sheets, the deeper size sheet, because it's a little bit bigger, sometimes can sag a bit. And so you end up with a bit of a buckle, but the medium is quite capable of supporting itself. Next up, this is a piece of deep plastic foundation. We also have it in medium and shallow. This is a black sheet, as you can see, and what you may not necessarily be able to see very easily is that this sheet of plastic has a thin layer of beeswax which is sprayed onto this plastic sheet. That beeswax makes it enticing to the bees, also gives it that odor of beeswax, so the bees very readily build off of this foundation. This particular type of foundation would work with, ideally with a groove frame, in other words a grooved top bar, grooved bottom bar, although you could use it in a frame with a wedge top bar and a grooved bottom bar. You run a little bit of a risk using a wedge top bar and a divided bottom bar because sometimes the wedge doesn't necessarily add sufficient pressure and the sheet can actually drop out. So ideally, groove, alternatively wedge top, groove bottom. Next up, this is a sheet of shallow Duragilt foundation. It's available in all sizes, deep, medium, and shallow. You'll notice that this particular type of foundation has a metal edge on both sides. And you'll also notice that it's fairly rigid. What this actually is a very thin layer of plastic sandwiched between two layers of beeswax. So the plastic gives it a little bit of support, and the beeswax, of course, makes it enticing for the bees. If you're going to use this type of foundation, ideally the groove frame is the best frame for this. However, if you use a groove frame, you have to build the frame around the foundation. You can't snap this in after the fact because these metal edges you can't bend them sufficiently without actually creasing it in the middle. If you want to build your frames in advance, then I would suggest using a wedge top bar with a grooved bottom bar, as you can install the foundation after the fact if you're using Duragilt and that particular type of frame. Next up, cut comb foundation. You'll notice that this is a little bit different in color, and you may also notice that you can actually see my hand through this foundation. It's a very thin sheet of foundation, It's also filtered a little bit more because this is actually an edible product. You want a very thin sheet of foundation so that when the bees draw the comb out on it and you consume the product, you don't have this thick layer of wax in that comb. Rather, this sheet of foundation sort of blends in with the comb and becomes part of it and is virtually undetectable. So you want to make sure you use cut comb foundation if you're actually going to be producing cut comb. This works well in a groove frame or also a wedge top divided bottom bar or wedge top groove bottom bar. Last up is a sheet of medium brood. This is simply a sheet of beeswax with no sorts of reinforcement. There's no wires, there's no layer of plastic in the middle. It's just a pure sheet of beeswax. In this case, again, a groove frame, but probably better suited would be a wedge top with a grooved bottom bar or a wedge top divided bottom bar. So there you have it. There are the various types of foundations. The most popular being the crimp wire, going on through the different types.